Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 7th chapter in the book of Matthew. We're going to cover up to the first 14 verses. This is connected to the Sermon on the Mount, the longest recorded sermon in either testament, everything from 5 to 7, 5:3 to 7:27 is underlined in red. This is his opening, his constitution of the kingdom is outlined much in the 5th chapter. And the 6th chapter we're going to review opens much in the same manner that the 7th one does, with a warning against hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is the vice which pays homage to virtue. Hypocrites, and this trait is fatal in human beings, sinful human beings, because they can take what should be a good deed and turn it into bad. So religious people are not immune to hypocrisy. This is the label we have to look out for, and we got to avoid it. Do no evil, lest no evil shall be spoken of you. Thus, when you do a kind deed, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, to be praised by men. Truly, I say to you, they have their reward. So their motivation, they're doing it to be praised by men. That means they have a selfish motive. They enjoy the adulation and the self-worship that comes in from doing good deeds, making charitable contributions. That is what a kind deed is. But also, more generally speaking, don't advertise the fact that you go out of your way to do whatever you do, whether you volunteer in nursing homes or anything like that. You know, it's do it for God and not for man. And your motivation must be the esteem of Elohim. And if this is what you seek, then you have the reward in the publicity you seek, but you forsake your reward from your heavenly Father. Same thing he says about prayer, verse 5. And when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogue and on the corners of the street to be seen by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward. Public prayer. Now, there is nothing wrong with prayer itself. It can be approached wrongly. There is nothing wrong with giving charitable contributions. There is nothing wrong with fasting in itself. The problem is the attitude and the disposition which gets in the way. So the hypocrite, they will pray out loud and in public, but they will not retreat to their... The definition of integrity is what a man does when no one is looking. People of integrity pray all the time in their closet. The hypocrites, they just love to get outside, outdoors. Look at me, center stage. I'm going to give a wordy, eloquent, I'm going to say the right things, and people are going to look at me to be seen by men. So to be praised by men or to be seen by him. But if your desire and motivation is to be seen by men, then it's all about you. And you have the reward in being seen, but you have no profit, no investment for having done what you've done in the heavens where they matter. You forsake the reward. Verse 16, the next one he speaks of is the practice of fasting, which is the deprivation of physical food. There's a lot of stuff in between here, such as the Lord's Prayer, for instance, and just these things about forgiveness, but we want to cover the full range of the 6th chapter. We did divide this chapter into 2, but 60, you can look those up for more on that. And when you fast, do not be saddened like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, so they appear to be fasting to men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward. There's nothing wrong with fasting, depriving yourself food in order to connect yourself with God, and it is closely connected to prayer, because if you are fasting without praying, then you are just starving yourself. You are not definitionally fasting, but people can take the corrupt, perverted human heart can take a good thing and make it wrong when they advertise the fact that they disfigure their face, they look beggarly, they purposely beat themselves up so they appear to be fasting to men. It's all about appearance, so if you advertise the groaning, of course you're going to look more righteous and holy and sacred and all that stuff, but you're going to have the reward in just the men that you seek to please. Verse 19 through 34 is the lesson we most recently covered. We're going to divide the preamble into the 2 lessons we spanned. This is verse 19. And do not lay up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up yourself treasures in the heavens, where neither moth nor rust destroys, nor thieves do not break and steal. there are earthly treasures. These are the riches. These are the possessions. These are the properties. But everything that stands now, every resplendent jewel and gem, every architectural wonder will one day be gone. They are no physical object or edifice or anything of the earth is immune to or is impervious to decay and death. So the fancy clothes that were once worn by royal kings, where are they now? They've been consumed by moths and rust. Look at the Rust Belt in America. These once thriving industrial centers are now a shadow of their former selves. And the danger of having worldly wealth is that you have to guard it. So if you are oriented towards the getting and the guarding of money, that means you are in service to mammon, and we are not to have divided loyalties. And we read of that in the 24th. We also read the 20th verse. So cast it in heaven, you will have a greater reward. Your reward is going to be that of the hypocrites if you cast them on earth, because no one can no one can steal. There is no possibility or potentiality of corruption or decay or death when you're in your heavenly reward. Verse 24, no one is able to serve two masters, for either he shall hate the one and love the other, or else he shall cling to the one and despise the other. You are not able to serve Elohim and mammon. There's not only no such thing as neutrality in the Christian life, the battlefield that we are on, there is no such thing as divided loyalties. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. James 1:8. So no more than a servant can serve two masters can we share our worship with Elohim, with any inferior entity. And mammon is the Aramaic term. It's actually not a deity or an idol, as far as I know. I think it was just the word for their spirit or ethos of the pursuit of material gain. They called it mammon. So wealth is a cruel master and a deceptive one, but the master we serve, his burden is light, and we should cling to him as Adam clung to his wife, and despise the false fleeting treasures of the earth for what they are. He says a lot of good stuff in between here, but verse 33, we're going to put the nail. Two more verses in the 6th chapter. But seek first the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness, and all these shall be added to you. Well, we pretty much have to comment on what comes before this. All the birds, all the grass of the field is cared for and provided for by Elohim, and we are the crown glory of his achievement. So don't worry about where you're going to eat, where you're going to sleep. Seek first the kingdom of God, of Elohim and his righteousness, and all the rest shall be added to you. You're not going to not have a roof over your head. You're not going to not have 3 meals a day at least if you seek first the kingdom of God. If you are trapped in the worldly worry and the web of anxiety, you're going to miss out. 34th and final verse, do not then worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow shall have its own worries. Each day has enough evil of itself. Worry is sinful because it is faithless when we are worried about and wrapped up in the future, and there's the anxiety-inducing, worst possible scenario outcome mentality. Then we will all we have is the present. So don't plan for the future and prepare for the future, but focus on today. Much in the same way that the main sinner you need to focus on is not the ones around you, but the one in the mirror. This bridges us to the 7th chapter, 1st verse. Do not judge, lest you be judged. Now, it's an oversimplification to read this as to say there's to be no judgment in the Christian life. What he's warning against is being judgmental, just to have it be your default state of mind. There's nothing wrong with critical thinking or discernment. We are called to judge. We have to have internal discipline in our church. There's a lot of laxity of that these days, and we have to judge the worthiness of our evangelical potential convert in the 6th verse, and judge the teachings of the judge teachers by the contents of their teaching, and we're also to judge them by their fruit. So we have to cultivate critical discernment. What he's saying is do not be judgmental, and because there's the principle of lex talionis, perfect retaliation, and in principle at here. So if you do not judge, then you will not be judged. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged, and with the same measure you use, it shall be measured to you. He flips the scripts and says, if you judge. So where he says in the do not judge, he's now saying if you judge, then you reap what you sow. Karmic boomerang, much in the same way that he who lives by the sword dies by the sword, so too does he who lives to judge others. Well, they will invite the retaliation that they flick on other people, and they do it unwittingly and unwillingly, but they invite it nevertheless because there is a principle of divine justice. Now, when you reserve yourself the right to judge others, that is potentially borderline blasphemous, because strictly speaking, judgment alone belongs to him. But we are still called to make judgments and moral discernment. So we are not to judge the others. And the main person, he's speaking of judgment of sin, and the Son of Man did not come to judge, but to seek and save the lost. So it wasn't his purpose and mission to judge the earth in his first coming, but in his second coming, that's going to wait. And we have to cede all judgment to him. So don't get trapped in the rat race and the maze of judging others and worrying about the sins of other people or even the world when you yourself have your own sin to attend to. Verse 3, and why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye and do not notice the plank in your own eye? He's using hyperbolic imagery, a splinter and a plank. A plank is a far larger piece of wood than a splinter. And the thing about sin is that it is so short-sighted. We notice its glaring defects in others far sooner than we notice it in ourselves. For instance, David in 2 Samuel 12, the prophet Nathan's rebuke is absolutely masterful. He presents David the fiction of a shepherd a rich man who fleeced a poor shepherd's final sheep, and then David said, that man shall surely die, and then Nathan says, you are him. So while David was worried about this rich man who had supposedly slain a poor man's sheep, he himself had sinned with another man's wife, adultery, and then he ended up lying when his deception didn't work. One sin inexorably progressed to the next, and ultimately culminates in murder. And David lives for about 9 months or a year without his until Nathan rebukes him. So David is a man after God's own heart, but even he is not immune to this trait that his biological descendant warned against. Or how is it that you say to your brother, let me remove the splinter out of your eye, and seek a plank is in your eyes? This is not to say we should not lend a helping hand when occasion arises and as a necessity demands. It is only to say we cannot help others if we are not helping ourselves. If we have all these sins in our own life, then who are we to play religious detective? The practice of being a religious detective is just bad business. It doesn't end well for the individual. It contributes nothing positive to the church. So stay away from judging others. It's okay to judge the world, but the other dangerous thing about judgment of sin is that we hate the ones we don't do, yet we love the ones we do. So the sinful human heart is a effectively worthless moral compass. Hypocrites, first remove the plank from your own eyes, and then you shall see clearly to remove the splinter of your own brother's eyes. He's saying the same word he used so many times in the 6th chapter, hypocrite. This is something we do not want to be. This is the favorite charge of the world. And of course, we are all hypocrites as Christians. We are not Christians because we are hypocrites, in spite of the fact that we are hypocrites, because we are Christians, because we are hypocrites. Christian is anyone humble enough to acknowledge their sin and say that we don't have the solution. But the thing he's talking about is the blindness that sin induces if you are so wrapped up in sin. And judgmentalism is a sin of the spirit, to have this harboring suspicion and the sneaking suspicion that everyone else around you is going to hell. But take care of your own self, and if you get rid of your own sin, you'll be able to see more clearly and lend a helping hand to a struggling sinner in need, because some people do struggle with sin and we have to help them, but we cannot help them if we do not help ourselves. Do not give what is sacred to the dogs, nor throw your pearls before the pigs, lest they trample them under your feet and turn and tear you into pieces. This is where judgment comes in. When we encounter the quality of a person, we have to measure what we're going to say and whether we're going to say anything at all on the quality of the potential convert. So we shouldn't waste our precious metals, gems, on those who are not going to appreciate it. What is a dog going to do with what is sacred? A dog is defiled. The Hebrew people had far more degraded estimation of dogs. In America, dogs are man best friends, but in the Hebrew, dogs were Gentiles and just these filthy creatures. They had dietary standards in the Mosaic law of cleanliness. But what's a pig going to do with the pearl but trample over it, and the pearl is going to be of no use. A pig has no aptitude or appetite for pearls, a gem. This is the worst, the filthiest animal, the most despised and rejected. But don't waste gems on precious commodities on unworthy recipients. Do not spread what is sacred to those who are unsacred. Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened to you. We understand that the first and final thing, the asking and the knocking, is not a one and done finality, because he says, seek and you shall find. So seek implies more than an initial momentum. We have to ask frequently and fervently. There is some power in praying for the same things at different times of the day and in different words, whatever's on your mind. But if you want something bad enough, you will pray for it. And no unrighteous request will he deny. So this is not a blank slate. This is not to take advantage or exploit the divine generosity, because this is contingent on the assumption that you are praying in his will. And no unrighteous request will he deny, and every righteous one that is commensurate with his will for you, he will answer. And if you ask questions, he might not answer your prayer, but he will give you one of three answers: no, yes, and not yet. And the not yet is often the most difficult one, because waiting can be the worst part, but that's what makes faith all the more essential and imperative. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it shall be opened. Tragically and realistically, not everyone who asks receives. Sin is a barrier which disables our access to divinity, as Isaiah 59:1-2, Proverbs 15:29, and John 9:31. But everyone who is in tune, everyone who is a saint worthy of the name, everyone who is a devoted disciple who asks anything that is commensurate and consistent with his will and his purpose and anything else. And in prayer, we don't only ask. Prayer is much more. We can praise, we can say thank you, we can have expressions of gratitude. We don't have to ask for anything. And how would you feel if you were a father and your child only approached you to ask for things? Eventually, your fatherly instinct would set in. But if you are a worthy son and a worthy servant and a worthy disciple, no unrighteous request will he deny. Or is there a man among you who, if his son asks for bread, shall give him a stone? Or if he asks him for a fish, shall he give him a snake? Bread and fish are edible, stones and snakes are not, and in fact you have more cause for concern for a snake eating you. Of course a father wouldn't give his son a snake when he asks for a fish, or asks for a bread, give him a stone. That's just implausible, it's inhuman, but the point that he's alluding to is that if even in wicked humanity there is some love between the father and his child, how much more love is there between our Heavenly Father and his children on earth? If you then, being wicked, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more shall your Father, who is in the heavens, give what is good to those who ask him? Humans' universal depravity is the fact and reality of life. Sin is embedded in all of us. We are all wicked. None of us are righteous. None of us are innocent. None of us are good, apart from the one who paid the price for our salvation. But even we who have this latent human instinct for sin and this drive and this uncontrolling urge for it, we know how to give gifts that our children will want, and they're going to be acceptable, and they are a testament of the generosity which exists even in between sinners. So there are good things which exist and are exchanged between bad people. This is not to embrace a morbid, extremist interpretation of the doctrine of universal depravity. It is only to say that we are all wicked compared to him, because this is the point of reference, your Father. How much more shall your Father who is in the heaven give what is good to those who ask him? First off, he has what's best. He knows what's best. He is the source of all blessings, and apart from him, no goodness derives. So even that bread that you give to the fish, that is because the Creator created the things that allow you to make the bread. Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. This is most familiarly and famously known as the Golden Rule, and this is distinct from the negative principle which appears and abounds in Rabbinic Judaism. There's nothing in the Old Testament that reads, do not do unto others what you would not do unto yourself. The similar negative approach and emphasis is alive and embedded in Hindu and Buddhist and also Greco-Romans, but we have the positive direction. How much more challenging is it to extend generosity rather than to not inflict injury? This is the positive direction, and we want to be moving forward with our spirituality, and not we would not want to inflict harm on ourselves. We would not want to punch ourselves in the face. We would not want to deprive ourselves of opportunity. So how dare we do that to others? Because the implicit principle is that we will be treated as we treated others in heavens. And this is the entire summation. This is the one who spoke with authority, and the closing of the 7th chapter. We're not going to get that far today. The crowds intuitively recognize that he spoke with authority, but he had the authority to surmise the law and the prophets into single principles. And he does the same thing with the 2 great commandments, and also in Matthew's book, and I think in Mark's, although Luke has that principle expressed by an inquiring lawyer with an ulterior and wicked motive in the 10th chapter, the Good Samaritan. Verse 13, enter in through the narrow gate, because the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. Only a remnant shall be saved. Salvation is an aristocracy, and a part of me wishes that it could be a democracy, but there is no such thing as universalism. Narrow is the way, and we have to be uncompromising and not unfilial while we are walking there, that the way is straight. In a lot of ways, he was a broad-minded, open-minded person, but in certain ways he was very narrow. There is only one name that man must be saved by in Acts 4:12, and that is his. And the snares and the literally surround us and entangle us are everywhere we look in the world, divergent and broad-minded, the way of the world, the way of the politically correct world is intolerant of Christianity for its claim of exclusivity. They think you can just chart your own path, make up your own rules as you go along, be your own God, do your own thing, but that leads nowhere good. It leads to destruction, which is hell and the outer darkness, and there are many who enter through it. So, unfortunately, most of us are not going to make it, and this should only increase our gratitude and provide the incentive to retain our steadfast adherence to the straight and narrow way, which leads to salvation. But beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep... Okay, that's actually the end of the lesson itself. We're going to save the 15th through the 29th for the next lesson. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to see you. Take care until then. Bye-bye.